This account comes from the astonishment first expressed in the late 19th century that even in recent American history, thriving belief and fear of witchcraft persisted in certain corners of the Southwest. Our story begins when writer Charles Fletcher Lummis, who lived from 1859 to 1928, journeyed to New Mexico. This video is made from an excerpt of his book called Some Strange Corners of Our Country, The Wonderland of the Southwest, which was written in 1892. When the author first relocated to New Mexico, he expected to settle into normal life as an American citizen. However, he immediately found himself plunged into a worldview more reminiscent of medieval Europe than the modern United States. "It often made me pinch myself to see if I were not dreaming," he writes. But the belief in witches and their dark powers was a disorienting reality here. He felt he had left the country he knew for one deeply invested in the supernatural. His native neighbors discussed witchcraft openly and seriously. He often heard chilling warnings to "be careful of her, she's a witch." People would point out those reputed to be witches. More disturbing still, some faced violent punishments and executions after formal accusations of practicing witchcraft. Thank you for joining your host and desert frontiersman Alan on another journey through the Southwest Desert. If you enjoy this desert tale, leave a like or follow. For further Southwest episodes, hit the subscribe button. The population in New Mexico in the late 19th century numbered about 175,000 people, but European settlers only accounted for 25,000 compared to 30,000 Native Americans and 120,000 Hispanics. Among these communities, belief in witchcraft colored every aspect of life. The local native tribes, like the Pueblos and Navajos, had especially intricate witchcraft beliefs. Their customs around protecting against, identifying, trying, and eliminating presumed witches developed over centuries. For example, when Pueblo parents have a child, ceremonies begin immediately to guard its soul from abduction by witches. Later in life, suspicious signs like red eyes, evidence of long nights rather than peaceful sleep, can mark someone as an ominous witch. Finding items tied to witchcraft magic like feathers of certain birds in someone's home could condemn them. When members of their society died, complex rituals lasting 4 full days followed. The tribes believed souls traveled to the afterlife over this time. The ceremonies intensely focused on disguising and misleading any witches chasing after the soul so they could not capture it in transit. Without these careful protections, newly deceased souls might face a terrible fate indeed. When crops failed, animals sickened, disease spread, or anything unfortunate occurred, suspected witches often bore blame from their fearful neighbors. Some also believed witches could transform into animal shapes, fly vast distances, and convene ritual meetings. The tribes viewed their spiritual leaders and medicine men as solemn guardians against this menace. The first duty at tribal rituals, dances, or any ceremony was driving off and punishing lurking witches. If conviction occurred after accusation, professional witch guards executed the guilty. One Pueblo village, Sandia, declined towards possible extinction from enthusiastically killing off presumed witches. In the author's village, the Tigua people distrusted approximately half their 1,100 population as witches. Only real fear of swift intervention by the 25,000 American populace living 12 miles away prevented outright violent purging, but they still imprisoned and physically punished some alleged witches, hoping to escape American notice. Just before the author arrived, the Tiguas executed the man living 2 doors down from him at midnight. Later, they imprisoned and tortured a young man whose only crime seems to have been witchcraft suspicion from his enemies. The author struggled to reconcile such horrors with the Tiguas' otherwise normal lives as parents and neighbors. To outside observers, these events seemed unjust murders, But within the tribes, formally convicting and executing presumed witches appeared as proper administration of justice. Their supernatural fears erased moral hesitation in destroying those believed to use black magic against them. A less ritualized but equally unsettling witchcraft culture prevailed among the far more numerous Hispanic community. Just as with native tribes, magic and witch fear imbued ordinary aspects of life. Seeking advantages over enemies or explanation for misfortune, many Hispanics felt comfortable attributing problems to sorcery. The author writes even intelligent, educated acquaintances sincerely blamed unfortunate events on revenge by those with witchcraft powers. In fact, the Hispanic community once formally tried and executed convicted witches under Spanish courts. Though authorities no longer allowed this, belief still ran deep. In recent years before the author arrived, 2 men beat an elderly Hispanic woman to death. They genuinely thought she had used dark magic against them and deserved death. More educated Hispanics might not go so far as murder, but intense fear of curses from witches caused them to give favors and gifts when solicited, no matter how high the price. The author writes, "Few dare eat anything offered by a witch, lest it place a curse upon them." And many local Hispanics had astounding stories blaming unfortunate fates on witchcraft. For example, a number of men confided to the author that witches had briefly transformed them into women. Their only relief came from paying opposing witches an exorbitant amount to change them back. Others talk earnestly of witches stealing their eyes and legs, physically attacking them for offenses, or colluding to ruin their lives. The tales even get more bizarre. A drunken man kicked a witch, provoking her to use powers to grow a live mouse inside his stomach. It tormented him painfully until he acquiesced to rich gifts for the offended witch. Superstitions persist around witch shape-shifting. Unusual animals sighted near homes at night likely serve as witches in transformed bodies. Even shooting stars convey fearful meaning, a sign of gathered witches traversing the night sky. Yet, however supernatural and unreasonable their claims to outsiders, those inside the Mexican witchcraft culture hold them as utterly sincere truth. This staggering realization perplexed the writer as he immersed in their world. Eventually, the author describes his own reluctant entanglement with regional witchcraft beliefs. He recounts having his left arm paralyzed following a minor blood vessel rupture in the brain. Despite possessing normal sensation, he lost motor control for over 3 excruciating years. His community of native neighbors, of course, dismissed entirely the medical explanation. To them, it was laughably obvious he had been afflicted by one among the witches thought to bedevil their village. Their spiritual beliefs allowed no other possibility. They smiled with a pitying superiority at the silly idea of mere biology causing such an injury. Some kindly suggested the author follow their customary practice, accuse whichever witch he believed was responsible so the medicine men could eliminate them. Continuing to assert medical facts clearly confirmed their view that another witch cured him later via the payment described by others. What conclusions can one draw from this immersion with neighbors who view the world so differently through a lens of witches, magic, and supernatural habits? The author struggles to convey the extent that these beliefs conflict with modern U.S. society surrounding New Mexico in the late 19th century. On one hand, he admits that the fantastic stories and rituals seem farcically childish and unreasonable to scientific thinking. It feels absurd to give them serious consideration. Yet, tens of thousands of fellow U.S. citizens as voters and community members cleaved passionately to this spiritual view as core truth. It puzzles him to realize that only minimal time separated these neighbors from colonial-era Europeans or Americans who embraced witchcraft as fervently as science. And despite relentless modernization and integration, Echoes of these beliefs in witches and their conjured malice continue rippling through the Southwest among descendants of early Hispanic and Native residents to this very day. The author's experience leaves a provocative portrait of the thin line between rational progress and fearful superstition within human society and memory. I hope you enjoyed this account from the late 19th century. Please leave a like or comment. For further desert romps, hit the subscribe button. Happy trails!